Emmy, if I met the younger self, the one who believed medicine was the future, would she recognise a life and career that you've built for yourself? I don't think I'd recognise myself at all, actually. And I don't think I would have realised how much happier this future that I'm living right now is versus the one that I had envisaged for myself.
Hello and welcome to Heels in the Hierarchy with
SJ
and Pegsy. And in this week's episode, SJ speaks to the brilliant Emmy, who shares her powerful journey of turning failure into success and lessons that helped her come back stronger than ever.
But at what point did you realise that plan that you had for yourself for however long that wasn't going to happen? At what point did that happen for you? I dreamed of being a doctor since probably in my early teens, after reading so many stories about doctors who went into other countries and helped transform the world, and I wanted to be one of those. But it wasn't until I guess I was in my second year at university and I kept failing the anatomy exams, and it just, part of the course I was flying through and other parts I just kept hitting a brick wall. And it was when I was doing the resits again for the third time and realising I don't think I'm going to make it. And that reality was terrifying. Welcome to Heels in the Hierarchy with SJ and Pegsy. Today's episode, we are exploring about what happens when the dreams and your plan falls apart. Before we get started and continue, please don't forget to download, share, and ensure that you are downloading, because that is how we increase our reach across different platforms. And continue to let your friends and colleagues and business partners know. So today we are in a really privileged place to be speaking to Emmy. Do you want to let people know who you are and what kind of career job that you're in at the moment? And then we go from there.
Yeah, my name's Emmy. I'm a payments product manager. And so I work within that hidden world that makes the payments that you make with your card or your mobile phone or online work, and how money moves from your accounts to those merchant accounts that you are paying and using. So that's the industry that I'm in. I sit within a product team devising and developing currency solutions, which is in no way related to the career I thought I was going to have for myself when, through school and going into university, I went to study medicine at Birmingham University. So a very different endpoint where I am now than where I started.
So are you okay if we start that then? That it sounds like this is very much, from what we've talked about, of looking back a little bit of what happens when the path that you dreamt so much disappeared, and how did that feel emotionally? Because obviously medicine and the career that you're in couldn't be more poles apart. So obviously it's different to look back now, but what was it like to have your dreams and think this is going to be my future? And what was that like for you?
I think that all through school, I hadn't ever really struggled with exams. I was very much that classic kind of grade A kind of girl. I loved the challenge of it. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed exams, actually. I loved being able to show what I'd learnt, and I enjoyed studying. So I didn't have much experience. I know this sounds arrogant, much experience with failure. So therefore I didn't have a toolkit to know even how to deal with it. Plus, this is the late 90s. I don't think there was much information at the time that helped you understand how you think, how you learn, how you memorize information. I didn't really know myself. I think that's true for most of us, right? When we're at school, we're in this mass system where everybody has to be taught the same way, is given information the same way, and you just have to either adapt or you're left behind. And so I went to medical school not really knowing myself, but also not having many tools to know how to deal with. So me being in a very different academic environment where I was nowhere near the top of the class. I was in a very large, Birmingham had a lot of, probably about 500 people per year. So we were in a very large group. We were being taught in an auditorium style where it was very much, we're talking at you, you need to retain this, you need to revise it. There wasn't very much practical application at that time. And so what I didn't know about myself that I learned later is that I'm actually very kinesthetic in the way that I learn. I like to interact, I like to debate, I like to talk, I need to process verbally. And therefore, being told, read a textbook, listen to this, try to remember these facts, and then regurgitate. That just didn't work for me. I needed the debate. I needed the ability to question and to talk about it. So the parts of the course I did really well were really the parts where it was ethics or different parts where you were in a debate, where you were working through, or problem solving worked brilliantly for me. Anything that was just learn this fact, regurgitate this fact in a 2-dimensional way didn't stick. And I didn't know that about myself. And I also didn't know how to even approach it. I just tried to work harder, do longer hours. But actually, that just made the problem worse. I think my brain was becoming more stressed. And therefore, I think the anxiety of not being able to remember. So even something I would know before I walked into that exam room or that Viva environment where they would just fire questions at you, I would forget the moment I walked in. Like I would just literally go into that fight, flight kind of mode. And I didn't know how to deal with that. So that was a really interesting learning journey.
But I think that's an interesting point generally, that the whole education system, as we know it, doesn't necessarily prepare you then to think about failure in a different way. So your experience, what you talked about, was that you didn't really have opportunities to understand what failure felt like, let alone how you could be adapting to that to not just build resilience, but be able to find different coping strategies. It felt like you were just thrown into the lion's den and then had to figure it out for yourself, which sounds really difficult. But also, if your identity and your drive is in one area of that's what you're going to achieve, that can make a massive impact on your whole identity and also how you can achieve, by the sounds of that.
Absolutely. I think I didn't have pressure from family or friends to become a doctor. This was very internal. This was something I had wanted to pursue. So I never had that pressure that other people may have had. That wasn't our family environment. We were taught just to be the best that we could be and serve other people. And I think those two things came together for me because I loved learning, I love science, and I really wanted to make a difference. And I saw medicine as the vehicle. And at that time, the only way I could do that, and bringing together all my values and my love of people and learning, that's how I thought I would achieve it. Thankfully, I've learned that that's not the only path, right? That wasn't the only way. But at that time, that's why it felt so difficult, because I couldn't envisage a future where I could achieve that, live out my values and reach my potential, I think both academically or in me, without becoming a doctor. And there's an element of identity in that, the arrogance of seeing that as a good career, something that would provide for you and your family. There's elements of pride and arrogance that go into that too. But there was also an element of just wanting to make a difference. And that's where I had put all of my hopes into that one singular basket.
So when obviously you went on this journey and discovered that it maybe not be your career path, not because of the career, but maybe in terms of your learning style and the expectations and the way that you needed to perform, did you feel like it was a setback, or did you feel like you personally failed? And in terms of that failure, what was it for you that made you realise this, I can't keep going around the circles of trying to succeed in an area that you weren't able to succeed in?
First of all, I didn't recognise that. I literally kept trying. My view was, if I try hard enough, I will achieve it. It was one of those things, I think those things that you sometimes pick up, that if you try hard enough, one day you will get there. In the end, that was the approach I took until I literally got the letter from the university saying, you've had enough attempts at this exam. You can't meet the minimum requirements to pass this year. You have to leave. And I think the disappointing was they had tried really hard to help me. I have no challenge. I have no issues with the university or the way they handled or tried to support me. My problem was I wasn't mature enough at the time to understand their feedback and to deal with it. They had made recommendations of maybe changing my course, looking at courses that were either more problem solving or played to my strengths in ethics, and they suggested I'd gone and done a psychology degree and become a clinical psychiatrist because their view was that really played to my strengths and I would succeed in that path. But at that time, I was very binary. I thought this is the only outcome that would make me feel like I've achieved something. And so I didn't take that good advice. And I regret that to a degree, But actually, where I am now, I'm so happy and fulfilled in the career that I have now that I don't regret that. But I do believe that if I could have listened better and taken advice from people that were older than me, but I was not mature enough to listen to them at the time.
It sounded like it was more of you had such a tunnel vision
Exactly.
of what your career path was going to look like, and that was the only route for you. There was no other options. Any other options would be a failure, which emotionally and psychologically sounds a huge pressure that you were putting on yourself to make sure that you had to perform. And do you think, looking back, how much of that was your ambition that came from you, and how much of that expectation did you feel from other people, or was it just you'd put these expectations on yourself?
This was all on me. This all came internally. And I think that was the challenge. If it'd been on other people, maybe I could live with myself a little bit more easily and made it something that was it was their issue to deal with. But I didn't have that pressure from family, friends, my church, my broader community. It didn't come from there. It was very personal. And therefore, until I recognized and separated the two things, that actually there are skills and things that I have learned from this experience that I can use in another career or in another path, that it's not, I think my worry was it was a waste of my time, that I had failed. I would take nothing from that experience other than great amounts of debt. That's where I felt the failure was. But actually, when I was able to take some time, reflect, see how much I had learned and benefited from the process, and actually that failure is a gift. It's a gift that shows you what you're capable of, what your limitations are in that narrow field, but also what your potentials are. And I learned so much about myself that I would never have learned had I not failed. So to me, it's like feedback. Feedback is a gift if you take it in the right way. Failure can also be a gift. It doesn't need to limit your future, but it took me a little bit of time, I think, to grieve those expectations I had of myself that didn't come true, but also then look for a new path forward.
So it sounds like as well, when you're talking about it, that there was some pivotal moments where you had to recognise not only that other people were saying this may not be the career, but you also needed to realise for yourself, something needs to change. This, what's the saying that you can't keep doing the same thing over and over again? That's insanity.
Yeah.
I'll get the right quote for everybody. There's that sense that you were so stubborn in your thinking that you had to prove yourself as well as anybody else was telling you that this is maybe not to do it. But what's lovely to hear is that you recognise then that you did need to agree a career that you weren't going to achieve, but also did that then have to go with grieving of the identity that you thought you were going to have?
Yeah, absolutely. I think most of us, we dream of a future. I dreamed of being a doctor or like a Médecin Sans Frontières, somebody that would go into environments or work abroad. Or I think I had a bit of a saviour complex, if I'm entirely honest, that kind of like Emma can ride in and save the day. And suddenly I realised I couldn't even save myself. I couldn't even figure it out. And I think I had a big ego and a lot of arrogance that I think is quite natural when you're young, when you think, I think sometimes people have that on the sports field. You're never going to get injured. You can do anything you want. We can be very not over ambitious, but we have huge expectations of what we can achieve sometimes. They're not completely anchored in reality. But I didn't even realise I had those complexes, but they were driving a lot of my thinking. And that's not to say that I haven't gone on to achieve great things afterwards, or I'm not happy with the choices, but I had to be more self-aware. I had a lot of growing up to do in reality.
That's, I suppose, in when you were talking, it reminded me of how important having significant people, mentors, coaches, people that will speak truth into you. As if your children go to university, I know there's a lot of exams happening at the moment, whether it's A-levels, whether it's moving forward to university. There's so much fear of failing that whether you're in a career or not, but obviously with what is happening at the moment, it just sounds like you had to go through that. But it's almost like no one really teaches you in education what failure feels like until you've gone through it. And it's easier now to look back and go, that built my resilience, that built my self-esteem. I had to reinvent who my identity actually was. And that's a painful journey to go through, which nobody really would then own up to sometimes your failures because they have to always present their strongest strengths at work, etc. But it sounds like what's happened in your story is that you had to go through your own mourning process, grieving process, shall I say. But actually on the other side of that, what you discovered is that failure was just a redirection for you and you had to sit with that. What would you be saying to people that may be feeling that way or have been in that situation who just not sure what to do next, knowing that what you do know now?
Yeah. I think do surround yourself with other people. I think what you said about mentors and other people that can speak truth into your life, that can see things, is really important. Vulnerability is strength, not weakness. And there's also this view that other people that are further ahead know exactly what they're doing. That is not true. We are all figuring it out every single day. And the pace of change in the world now isn't at an alarming rate in the case that most companies are constantly pivoting and developing. I still love that sketch from Ross in Friends was as he's trying to pull the sofa out of the stairs, right? But that is what it feels like, and it's stressful. And it's like you're trying to figure out, how am I going to get from here, from A to B, right? And it's not linear and it's messy, but the learnings are rich and the journey is interesting and you meet incredible people along the way. So I'd say, first of all, it's good to listen. You don't need to take on every piece of advice, every piece of feedback, but be open to hearing it and reflect on it yourself. Because one of the mentors I had, for example, was a consultant that I worked with after I'd failed at university and I was a medical secretary. I was just trying to pay the bills and trying to figure out what am I going to do. And I was thinking about NHS management at the time, just saying, can I take the learnings I've had? And he just looked at me and he said, you will always be bitter that you're not doing that. You need to use the skills that you would take, but don't do it in the NHS. Go and do it in the corporate world. Be free of that baggage. Let it go. Reinvent your career in a different domain that isn't constantly a reminder. And that was like amazing advice. He wrote me a really helpful reference on my skills that I had that I was able to then take into an administrative job. And then I did that role for a while, and then I started in Barclays, and then that gave me the training underpinning that enabled me to get into product, which is another journey. But surrounding yourself with people that you trust, that you can hear their stories, really, you can't underestimate that. But secondly, don't think that they have all the answers, that other people know exactly what they're doing, because they don't. We're all on a journey and we're all learning, and even companies are pivoting constantly. So don't ever see that as a negative. It's not a compromise. It is it's a natural part of developing a career.
I think you've said it all in a nutshell. So it sounds, part of it is encouraging our listeners to say, there is so many opportunities. And what I find really interesting about that story is that some people could have taken that coaching, mentorish advice as if you don't want me here. You just want to go use it. But actually you really listened to his intentions behind what he was saying about you're wasted in this role. Go and utilize it in a role that you will be able to excel in those areas, which then would really adapt and build your confidence again.
Yeah.
Sometimes having people to see your potential and actually redirect you it's probably been your pivotal moment, I think. And what strengths from your original, do you think, ambitions still serve you today?
First of all, I'm naturally a problem solver, right? I wouldn't have put it in those terms at the time, but the point of a doctor is you have a problem and you want it fixed, right? And actually that's what I do every single day. I'm always overwhelmed with, Emma, we've got this issue, how do we solve it? And it's not like a process issue where you go, okay, if I do 1 + 2 + 3, that equals this outcome. Actually, a lot of the time, the journey is not clear. And so the skills, like with the doctors, what they're looking for is evidence. What they're looking for is markers or outcomes that can maybe guide them to what that diagnosis would be and what's the right treatment path. And actually those skills. So I think problem solving, really listening to what the issues are, getting data that can support it, and then figuring out what are you going to do then in order to achieve the desired outcome. So that would be number one. The second one is I love people. So don't put me in a dark room on my own working, coding in the corner. I need to be around people. I like to lead. Doctors generally lead teams. They're part of a multi-network group. And so that's one of the things that I really excelled at, was being part of those kind of communities and groups. So I didn't want to work alone. And I'm intelligent. I think it took me a really long time to remember that, because I think my confidence had been so broken that I didn't believe, because I couldn't pass those exams, that I wasn't intelligent. And it took me a long time to go, no, I am. I can listen, I can understand, I can process information, I can learn. And I think that was the thing that probably took me the longest, was that my ability to trust my mind to learn new things. So therefore, going into a brand new industry, as I did in payments, it's constantly evolving, it's constantly changing. It's so dynamic and exciting, and I love it. I'm really passionate about it, partly because it never stands still. It's constantly evolving, but you need to trust that you can learn. And so every day, I say, is a school day. And I think that's the same for most people in most industries. We have incredible brains that are able to learn new things all the time. You are never stuck. There's always an opportunity to learn something new. And I think the AI revolution actually is giving you new tools to learn new things and to do things in different ways. I think those were the transferable skills I took, which problem solving, leadership, people leadership, especially loving people and moving them forward, and the ability to learn.
And it sounds like actually you moving role into a completely different sector, which is the corporate sector, and taking that mentors or coaches' advice about utilising that skill, that is what builds your confidence.
Yes.
Because sometimes it's easy to listen to someone's story and go, they're already there. So of course they're confident and sounding empowered. But what I'm hearing is actually you had to have some action and try again in a different sector to then build your confidence and your identity in you as a person, rather than the job or the role or the title, which I think it's a massive narrative change, I think, which is probably more better for your own mental health and the way that you see yourself and your identity of who you are with you as your skill set, rather than I can achieve X, Y, and Z as a job title, which sounds healthier as well.
Very much. And I think job titles are very fluid. They mean different things in different companies, titles. So I'm a head of currency solutions. I've been a VP. I've been a product manager. They move around, like different companies have different grades. But the problem is if you're I can see this in some people that I've mentored, where they think that success is getting to that next job title. But actually, I think you're missing the point, because success is not just within the workplace, it's in your whole life. How do you balance all of those ambitions that you have for yourself, your family, your community? All of those broader things need to be balanced in order for you to be successful. Because I've seen some people that may have a great job title and a great paycheck, and they're as miserable as you like, because they have no balance in their lives. They've had a lot of broken relationships because it's come at the cost of that. And so for me, redefining success in the corporate sector, in the environment that I work, is something that I've had to continually redefine as I've been in different chapters of my life. But I've learned to untie my self-worth from that job title.
I think that's helped. That's what I'm hearing is that was your moment of your aha moment of you've grown to love who you are with your skill set, less around the job title and what that all entails in terms of that corporate. And I'm interested in terms of the women. Often I know if Peggy would hear, we talk a lot around our imposter syndrome and women empowerment, and often wanting to have that every little element ticked off the JD before we go for a job. What's been your experience in the corporate world within women and leadership? And is there anyone that you've gone, actually, this is something that is really stood out in terms of what you've learned being in this sector?
So that's a really great question. I think the first thing was when I joined Barclays, and apologies for a bit of a story. So one of the things I did there was, obviously I was in a brand new segment. I didn't know anything about it. And so what I loved was I just wanted to understand how things worked. It was like, I didn't want to just be, at the time I'd gone into a sales leadership role. But I was so fascinated with trying to understand how things worked. And then I realized what I loved was learning about something and then telling other people how it worked. So I ended up in a kind of a training sort of role. And then I was like, oh, and now I wanted to do this. And so then I ended up more in a product role because I was like, I now understand it. I now know how to talk about it. And now I can see where this could be used and developed. So I was in that kind of journey. But all of that happened within the safety and the fantastic environment that was Barclaycard, which is a great company, great values and great training platforms. For me, however, I got to that point where I needed to take that opportunity to move outside of that environment to not just test myself, but to develop and grow further. And I had an opportunity to join Visa. And when you talk about confidence and leadership and self-worth and imposter syndrome, I think that was the challenge is I was very much, can I do this? Can I go and join a company like Visa and talk to other acquirers and businesses in payments and give them this vision and these insights? And I didn't trust myself, but I had to, in one sense, throw myself into that experience and learn on the job and trust that I could learn and trust that I could communicate clearly and I could challenge and that I would be supported. And actually, I built that confidence through my actions, through taking those risks and that initiative. And I think sometimes we want to only move roles when we know we can do everything. But if you already can do everything, you're not going to learn anything. You're not going to develop. You're not going to stretch yourself. You're basically just moving from one role to another. You've got to rebuild all of that relational capital and the knowledge of that business, but you personally aren't developing and growing. So I think finding roles that will stretch you, where you can bring the core skills and what makes you tick, and you can bring that to that role, but expecting that there is going to be this delta, this area that's going to stretch you and develop you. And so when I moved from Barclays to Visa, that's where I grew a lot of my confidence, found my voice, felt able to challenge men that had been in the industry 20 odd years, or sitting around that table, and had a great female boss. And she said, do not be the girl that makes the tea.
I love that.
She was like, when you walk into that room, don't volunteer to take the minutes. Don't go around asking everybody what they want to drink. Get your drink, sit down, be ready to lead. And it's those kind of things that I was like, yeah, I have the right to be in this space. And I'm going to be confident. I'm going to own my voice. I'm going to listen. I'm going to learn. I'm going to be respectful. But I'm not going to be spoken down.
It just reminds me of some of the things that Peggy and I talk about around. We talk about soft skills as if it's supposed to be something around relational, being able to, or the skills that women innately have that makes them what we would call excellent leaders, because they're ready. You talk about Simon Sinek a lot on our podcast, and he talks a lot about how much women have it. A lot of the skills that already enable them to thrive as leaders, but the culture enables them to not be seen. And when you were talking, I really liked the element of, it's a shame that that's a bad thing to do. Make a cup of tea for everyone and you think that's your personality thriving. But actually what that mirrors is not leadership, not the skills that people say you've been taken seriously. And I'm curious, is there still in your career and in that sector an area where you think that there is a divide around authenticity as a woman to be able to lead without having to almost self-sabotage her own ability of personality is one good. So I evolved my own style to do that with these guys. It's a bit embarrassing to admit, but basically I understood what she was saying. Don't go around being that. But I'm a very touchy-feely kind of person, and so what it used to be is like the first time you'd meet me, I'd shake your hand, right? The second time I'd meet you, you would get like the kind of the continental kisses on either side of the cheek. And then the third time we'd meet, it's the Emma hug, right? And what was funny was at the start, the guys didn't really know. But then we started getting, and I'm talking like corporate level leaders of C-suite, men from banks all around Europe. I'm talking whether you're in Finland or in Sweden or in Germany or Bulgaria. And we were having these big conferences and meetings from some really well-known brands. And I'd be walking in and one person would get a handshake and the other person would get a kiss. And the other person is like, oh, your family. And we'd have a hug. They understood that I was leading authentically. I wasn't like wearing the corporate suit, sounding like a man, acting like a man.
And I would bring in a lot of personal stories of my own family, my own journey. And that's how I was leading authentically, because I'm a very, not an open book in terms of anything's open, but I like to make a really human connection. And so, yes, I'm not going to be the girl that's going to take all the minutes and try to serve everybody, but I am going to be authentic to my style. And actually that worked really well for me. And before I left, it was getting to the point where the guys would be like, why didn't I get a hug? And I'm like, we haven't met enough yet. We haven't got to that point. I'm not suggesting everybody goes around hugging their co-workers, but in some environments it's not appropriate. But I found that my way to build relationships in that environment that enabled me to be authentic to me.
And what would you advise other people to do? Because obviously it sounds like you've one of the skills that we are obviously innately amazing at doing, and it sounds like you've been doing it your whole career, is adapting. You've adapted your role, you've adapted who you are, but you've also then discovered your new love of not excusing who you are as a person in your leadership roles. So if it's other people struggling, it did make me think about, you've been there. So now you've gone on your journey of, I'm good at own being an authentic leader. But what does that look like? And how would you advise people to keep to being authentic, but also being a strong leader and being a woman in the room in their workplace?
I think it depends on the setting, but generally, I always start all my meetings, whether it's on a Teams meeting, internal or external, or even in a boardroom setting, I always start with a personal component. I'm always going to share a personal anecdote, or I'm going to ask somebody how their weekend was, or tell them a funny story that happened at a weekend, because human connection is incredibly important for building trust. And I found it to be a really great way to put everybody at ease. Secondly, vulnerability, owning up and saying, I got that wrong, or I didn't understand that. Please, can you explain that? Have I understood you correctly? Like listening and playing back what you've heard and being open to say, I don't agree, or I don't understand, or explain that is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of, I'm actually very confident with who I am. I don't need your validation of my intelligence, but actually I need this piece of information clarified, is a really strong statement. And I think most of us, when we look at authentic leaders or servant-hearted leaders, they care about you, they want you to succeed, and they want you to understand. And so I want that to be the same way that I look after people. I want them to understand what I'm saying. I want them to feel heard. I want to give them the space and the time to ask the questions, but I also want my questions to be answered. So I don't feel like I have to apologize for asking clarifying questions. I don't need to ask permission to be heard. My voice deserves to be heard. And I think the emotional intelligence that women bring into those meetings, and by creating that, the personal connection between the other people around the table, can actually create a great atmosphere for really strong collaboration.
For the listeners who may be in that element of self-doubt, and you've talked about just going for it and having the core skills, but they're not feeling ready and they're not sure. It sounds great when you're saying just do it because you're in that other side of it.
Yeah.
But what is it, the skills, and what is it that you feel that people really need to hear about taking that step to then go for that other role that may seem too big because they haven't got that? I think sometimes it's so much easier once you're in that space and you can create the leadership team and the authenticity. But if you haven't got there yet and you don't have good mentors, or you don't have a great manager who sees your talent, how would you, from your experience, be able to go for people who are self-doubting right now or in that space? What would you say, knowing your journey so far?
I think there's twofold. One of them is skill-based development, and the other one is experience development. From a skills base, I didn't get to leading meetings, managing agendas, coordinating outcomes, like from nothing. That was a skill I had to learn. And so I did simple things like I planned an agenda. I met with the people that were turning up to that meeting. I tried to understand what they were trying to achieve, and I would try to almost know the outcome before everybody was in the room to make that decision. The debate didn't really happen in the room. It happened before we got in the room. The room was the ratification of the decision that was made before. So I learned how to stakeholder manage. I learned how to be clear in my communication. The good news is a lot of the tools that we have now with AI allow you can sit there, you can whiz up an agenda, you can ask it, where are the issues? What might this person be thinking? What questions should I prepare for? You can prepare a lot beforehand. And you can do that as well with experiences. If you can't find an environment to do that, you can simulate one. You can create, okay, I'm going to present in this scenario. I am a product manager at a payments company. I have this idea. This is what it looks like. What would a CFO ask me? What would the head of technology ask me? What would the head of sales ask me? Or I've got this issue. These are the challenges I'm facing. And you can role play that with ChatGPT or with Claude or with any AI tool that you have. Those LLMs are really powerful and are really good at giving you role-based kind of answers and solutions. So what I've had to learn from experience, I think people who don't have that, by getting it wrong a lot of the time, by the way, and then reflecting on how could I have done that meeting better? Why did that meeting all unravel? Why did nobody agree with I think now we can go in better prepared because we can plan better, more effectively. And the other area that I still struggle with and I'm working on is I'm not very succinct, as you will have realized from this podcast. And a lot of the tools out there, I now talk to them and I ask it to give me more succinct answers to the point I'm trying to make. And that's in my emails, that's in my Word documents, that's in my summaries. And so there are a lot more tools. So even if you don't have the skills and even if you haven't had a lot of experience, there are now new tools that can help you get there faster and not need 10 years of trial and error like I've had.
I love that. I think it's that balance, I suppose, between being vulnerable enough to ask for help, but also have the confidence to take the risk that it's not a personal issue, it's a career choice. Not quite like that myself, but sometimes I surprise myself. And I think that is so important to not be fearful of technology in that sense, to be able to role play. I really like that element of practice always makes perfect, but also own who you are as an individual. And I think that's why it sounds like that's why you've got your balance now. You know your abilities, you know your capabilities, but you're always eager to learn, shape and develop and not lay on your laurels in that way and not be manipulated by the other voices in the room, but be guided by that, which sounds like such a healthy mindset to be. I think there was a point where I was looking for promotion, like I'd already achieved what I wanted in the roles, and I kept applying for the next role, like the next grade up or the next job title, or the next pay grade kind of thing. And honestly, I failed multiple times. Like I'd go for interviews and I'm like, I'm perfect on paper. I've got a track record, like I've got achieved, and I wouldn't get it. And because of my fear of failure, that was just like, okay, I'm just not good enough. And then I actually went to those hiring managers because it was internals and I'd go, tell me why that person over there got it. Or what was it that I didn't do? I need to try harder. I was trying to figure it out. And a few of them were kind enough to give me some really good feedback. But one of it was, you don't have external experience. Like you're just regurgitating everything we've already told you. You don't bring something new, stuff we don't know. I was like, okay, that's interesting feedback. But secondly, I was often going for roles that would bridge a personal development gap, something that I'd been told was a gap in my skill set. But that meant that wasn't a strength. And so I learned that there's a certain point where, yes, you can try and address those personal development areas, but it's much better to build a career based on the things that you're great at, that you're going to excel at, and your strengths, and finding roles that match your strengths rather than trying to be this unrealistic, fully rounded human being that never does anything wrong, that it's perfect in every dimension. That's just unrealistic. So unless you want to be a CEO and you want to have worked in every function of a business to bring that skill set, find roles that you love and then you will enjoy doing what you do and learn. So that was the other thing, is I didn't just fail at medicine. I failed multiple times in interviews, in going for promotions, but I learned through those failures and adapted. And when I started going for jobs that were really about where my strengths were, I was much more successful. So interestingly, thinking about what we do now, what definition of success have you completely let go of then? If you've learned from your experiences, what's something you completely had to let go of?
I would say two things. Job title is one. I'm not saying it's not important. It's just I'm not looking for necessarily the next step up. Secondly, how many people do you manage? I think in my earlier part of career, my importance was how many people am I leading? How many people are in my team? I think the most people I've ever managed in a group was about 20. And how do you compare like that versus people that run like maybe a call center or an operation or run a cafe, or like, it's a ridiculous metric, right? The number of people you manage has no measure of success. I then went from leading very big teams to suddenly being an individual contributor with the same P&L, with the same like financial responsibility for performance in the business, but with nobody working for me. And that took an ego hit as well, because I was like, oh, I'm not leading people. I like leading. But then suddenly you realize the freedom of that, because suddenly you're not dealing with all of the HR issues and all of the personality challenges. And then I was like, oh, I can actually get some work done. And so that's been, and now I'm in that midway where I lead some people and I'm able to, and that's the other thing. Leadership is not about people management. Leadership is how you lead yourself, how you lead others towards an outcome that you're trying to guide them towards, how you support people through that process, how you challenge yourself every day to be better. Nobody needs to give you a job title with the word leader in it for you to be a leader.
Yeah. No, I would totally agree. I think anyone can be a leader. I think it just makes leadership is a skill set that you have to let go of the ego.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about success and thinking in terms of how did you find that to be success can be sustainable in a way that isn't exhausting, but yet as women, what is it that you think we're getting wrong around the ambition that we have to have it all, that we have to spin all the plates, that drains us so much that the best people in our lives, that gets the worst out of us? What is it that you've learned and gone, this is a piece of advice I would absolutely have given to my younger self? And for your children, your nieces, the women in your life that are growing up in this culture with so much uncertainty, what is it that you would have gone, this is a piece about success, what that actually looks like?
Yeah. Success to me has been about finding a degree of balance across the various areas of my life rather than just success at work. Because if you only are striving for success to mean I get that promotion, I get that bonus, I get that job title, I get that perk, or I get that next level, then one, you'll be chasing that at the expense of everything else that actually truly matters in your life. So for me, success has been, what is it that I need to bring back home? And how do I give myself enough that I still have enough energy to be present when I'm back at home? So when I'm at work, I want to be the best version of myself at work. When I'm at home and with my family, I want to be the best version of myself for my family. Now, do not mishear me. I do not get this right. I can be exhausted from one and snappy in the other. The tube beat, you're not like, you can't switch one off and switch one off. But I think of try to find success in terms of the whole rather than just in my career component. So for me, what that means is I'm in it. I love the job that I do. I'm in a company that I respect and enjoy being part of, have good connections. And so I'm not looking for that next step. I'm actively not answering the phone for opportunities because at the moment, the current role that I'm in allows me to be in London 1 or 2 days a week and work from home 3 days a week, which means that 3 days a week I can take my daughter to school and I can maybe pick her up and I can get to brownies and she can do some after school clubs, and there is a mix. And between me and my husband, we can manage that. If I went for the next step, I might have to travel more, which I don't have to. Previously in roles, I used to travel 2 or 3 days a week across Europe, whereas that's not realistic. And so the good thing is different parts of your life have different seasons and different responsibilities. You might be caring for an elderly parent. You might be going through IVF. You might be planning to get married. You might be on child number 3 and one of them is sitting exams and the other one is not sleeping through the night. We all have a home context that we're working within and out of. And so success has to mean that your family isn't suffering at the expense of your career succeeding. And for me, that balance is, am I bringing in enough to help us meet our family goals? And is there enough of me still available to be present as a wife, present as a mother? And sometimes there's capacity to then see my friends, see other members of the family. Like I have to try and keep that in balance. But what I've also learned is I have to keep some in reserve for me. Like, I need time to go and work out. I need to look after my sleep. I need to think about my nutrition. Like, all of those things need to be in balance for me to see it as a success. And I've had these conversations with some of my male colleagues where for them, success is, I don't know, that earning or that. And for me as a woman, I think we have too many other responsibilities to put it in such a small area. I think if you're married or in a committed relationship or you've got children, success has to be broader than a pay packet or a job title.
Especially in the culture that we have and how much AI has introduced things and career changes all the time. There's no certainty in work roles. And that's why I think it's so poignant you being able to do this conversation with us, because it just emphasizes that there's so many things that change, but it's our response to it, our adaptability, our skill sets, and keep trying for that next step. So to keep that spirit of conciseness, I've got a few questions to close to try and see what you think. So just complete a sentence for me. I used to think success was a job title. The best leadership lesson I learned was trust yourself and trust others around you. And women need to stop apologizing for speaking, being in the room and having an opinion. That's a lot. And the younger needed to hear change is constant. It's only going to get faster. Pivoting is fine. And then finally, what is the one thing you hope our women listeners will take away from your story in our conversation today? Just because of where you think you're going to end up changes, it does not make you a failure. We're constantly learning. We're constantly developing. Things are changing all around us. And the destination may be better than you ever could have dreamed of. So just because one door closes and another one opens that looks very different doesn't mean to say that what's through that door isn't going to be even greater. There's a lot to be excited about. And we're very good at adapting, and women are very good at reinventing ourselves. So take what we had in the first episode is Peggy and I had, feel the fear and do it anyway. So thank you so much for being part of our episode today. And until next time, keep your heels high and your standards higher.